as Mark Wolf resigns from Massachusetts in a stinging attack, an indictment, if you will, of Donald Trump. He published in the Atlantic magazine and resigned on the 7th of March. Law students are voting with their feet and running, screaming away from the Department of Justice, where they refuse to seek a job, hollowing out further the Department of Justice, who can't replace the 5,000 people that they fired or that resigned, hollowing out the institution. No, there's a whole generation of young law students who refuse to work for the Department of Justice, and it's their choice. They can't be conscripted into it. They can't be inducted and drafted into it. And Donald Trump's attacks on higher education and universities and the liberal education process and the law students and the law school programs and the pro bono programs and the diversity, equity, and inclusion programs and law firms have registered with young voters. The same young voters that put Zoran Mamdani in as mayor in New York, that put Mikey Sherrill and Governor Spanberger in Virginia. Those same young voters, some of them Burnocrats, have woken up and said, we're not going to work for the Department of Justice. And they've run away from Pam Bondi and from the true chief legal officer, Donald Trump. And then on top of that, those two reports, what do we have? We wake up today. Donald Trump has pardoned 77 enablers of his to stop the peaceful transfer of power in 2020 in his attempt to rewrite history. And included in that is a small group of his lawyers, many of whom lost their bar license or had them suspended. And he's given them a federal pardon. And I think there is a message there that Donald Trump is shrinking before our very eyes, and that he thinks there's a chance, a very good chance, that MAGA legacy will end in 2028 and that it will be replaced by a Democratic president who, with a new Department of Justice, could go after these people under certain claims like treason that don't have a statute of limitations or an expiration date. As at the same time, on the same day, Mark Wolf, former Justice of Massachusetts' federal court, says not only is Donald Trump lawless and a rogue and reckless and a criminal, but there are people around him that all should be indicted and investigated, like Big Oil. And this is a judge who has presided over a series of public corruption cases his whole life. Welcome to Tuesday on Legal Layoff. Let's get down to the pardons first, and then we'll talk about Wolf. On the pardon front, these are the lawyers that obtained a pardon. That's not an exoneration. That means you did something bad, but the president's giving you a pardon as a result of it. Christina Bobb worked with Rudy Giuliani, Ken Chesebro, Jeffrey Clark, who was the attorney general for a minute and apparently is back in the government as the acting head of the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs. Ken Chesebro, Jenna Ellis, Mark Meadows, Chief of Staff, Sidney Powell, people that were indicted in Georgia, people that were indicted in Arizona, Boris Epshteyn, unnamed co-conspirators in the Jack Smith prosecutions, along with fake electors. See, he thinks Donald Trump wants you to believe that that is a position of strength, that he gets to wipe clean the record from these people. I see this as a sign of weakness, that these are the people that should worry when a Democrat is a president in 2028 and we have a restored Department of Justice, because they're at risk to federal prosecution. That's why Donald Trump gave them the federal pardons, because it doesn't help them with their state problems. It doesn't help them with Arizona's prosecution of fake electors or Wisconsin's or Michigan's investigation. It doesn't help them with the state bar regulators looking at bar licenses. This doesn't exonerate them from that. So I had to think, why now? Why federal? Why all of these things at this moment? It's because Donald Trump is worried he's going to lose. And he wants to, as he's running out of power and the grip, and he's running off the grip of power, then he has to find a way around it. And he has to find a way to reward his friends while he still has the power. Now look, all of these people, Giuliani, Powell, Christina Bobb, Ken Chesebro, Jeffrey Clark were all referred to as team crazy within the White House for a reason. It all came out during the Jan 6 investigation. Some people will say, and they'll snicker about it in MAGA world, aha, he exonerated them. No more federal prosecutions. But that wasn't ever their threat. I don't think a state bar is now going to revisit whether Jeffrey Clark should lose his law license or Rudy Giuliani. They're not going to get them back because there's a federal pardon. That's stupid. And what he really has to worry about is people like Mark Wolf, federal judge, who said the following on his way out after a career that started in 1985 with President Reagan. He says the reason for his resignation as a senior status judge, and no, that does not open up a vacancy for Trump to fill. My reason is simple. I no longer can bear to be restrained by what judges can say publicly or do outside the courtroom. President Donald Trump is using the law for partisan purposes, targeting his adversaries while sparing his friends and donors from investigation, prosecution, and possible punishment. This is contrary to everything that I've stood for in my more than 50 years in the Department of Justice and on the bench. As he continued, as I watched in dismay and disgust my position on the bench, I came to feel deeply uncomfortable operating under the necessary ethical rules that muzzle judges' public statements. Day after day, I observed in silence as President Trump, his aides, and allies dismantled so much of what I dedicated my life to. What Nixon, the last criminal president, did episodically, Trump now does routinely and overtly. Prosecutorial decisions during this administration are a prime example. He then goes on to say how the Department of Justice guidelines are not being filed. Trump has utterly ignored the principles of fairness in prosecution. In a social media post, he instructed Attorney General Pam Bondi to seek indictments against 3 political adversaries, even though the officials in charge of the investigations at the time saw no proper basis in doing so. The Department of Justice has evidently chosen to ignore matters in the past it would have investigated. It's been reported that a lavish April 2024 dinner at Mar-a-Lago, after executives from a major oil company complained about how the Biden administration's environmental regulations were hurting their business, Trump said if they raised $1 billion for his campaign, he would promptly reverse those rules. They raised the money, the rules were reversed. The oil executive should be prosecuted for corruption and for fraud and for participating in those payments. He says the same thing about the cryptocurrency. He says that Trump launched his own cryptocurrency. At the time, his Department of Justice disbanded its cryptocurrency enforcement unit. The top 220 buyers of Trump's cryptocurrency were invited to a dinner with Trump. 67 of them invested more than $1 million. Justin's son, who was born in China and is a foreign national, put in $10 million. And then it reportedly spent $75 million more. Foreign people can't invest in elections. He says at the end of his order, former Judge Mark Wolf, I resigned in order to speak out, support litigation, and work with other individuals and organizations dedicated to protecting the rule of law and American democracy. I intend to advocate for the judges who can't speak for themselves. To those in the inner circle and friendship with former Judge Mark Wolf, we invite him on to here on Legal AF to talk with me and brief our audience. But when you put it all together, what do you have? You have a shrinking President Trump who is worried about the future, whose Department of Justice is in shambles and he can't do a thing about it, whose law students from top law firms and other law firms are abandoning the Trump administration, refuse to work in its Department of Justice. And all he has on his mind is to make sure when, not if, he loses, that the group around him, including those attorneys, don't get federally prosecuted by the next Department of Justice. That's what he's worried about, because under treason, there is no statute of limitations. There is no expiration date. And he hopes these people can use a pardon to try to get their law licenses back, and I don't see that happening. but we'll continue to follow it. You're here on Tuesday on Legal AF. Hit the free subscribe button. Help us continue to grow this pro-democracy channel. We're trying to get to 1 million by Thanksgiving. If we can do it with your help, we will. 1 million subscriber base. Come over to Legal AF Substack and help us there as well. So until my next report, I'm Michael Popok.
I'm Michael Popok, and I got some big news for our audience. Most of you know me as the co-founder of Midas Touch's Legal AF and the Legal AF YouTube channel, or as a 35-year national trial lawyer. Now, building on what we started together on Legal AF, I've launched a new law firm, the Popok Firm, dedicated to obtaining justice through compassionate and zealous legal representation. At the Popok Firm, we are focused on obtaining justice for those who have been injured or damaged by a life-altering event, by securing the highest dollar recoveries. I've been tirelessly fighting for justice for the last 35 years, so my own law firm organically building on my Legal AF work just feels right. And I've handpicked a team of top-tier trial fighters and settlement experts throughout all 50 states known as big auto injury attorneys who have the know-how to beat heartless insurance companies, corporations, government entities, and their attorneys. Big Auto's attorneys working with my firm are rock stars in their respective states and collectively responsible for billions of dollars in recoveries. So if you or a loved one have been on the wrong side of a catastrophic auto, motor vehicle, rideshare, or truck accident, suffered a personal injury, or been the victim of medical malpractice, employment harassment or discrimination, or suffered a violation of your civil and constitutional rights, then contact the Popok Firm today at 1-877-POPOK-AF or by visiting my website at www.thepopokfirm.com and fill out a free case evaluation form. And if we determine that you have a case and you sign with us, we don't get paid unless you do. The Popok Firm, fighting for your justice every step of the way.